All right, let's talk Dallas Cowboys. I'm Nick, and this is our daily Cowboys show, breaking down all the latest news happening, rumors with the Dallas Cowboys. Obviously, we're in the middle of training camp. Wasn't any practice yesterday. Still a lot of great news to talk about, a lot of stuff to cover. Remember to stay tuned to the end of the episode. That's when we answer any questions you have based on comments from prior videos. We'll also, if you have a good comment or an interesting comment, we'll give you a shout out and address that as well. So if you have any comments or want to hear me address any comments or questions, make sure you stay tuned to the end. That's where I'll get to those. And like I mentioned a second ago, no practice yesterday, so there's not a lot of, hype videos, not a lot of energetic clips to get everyone's blood pumping, get excited for the season. Doesn't mean there's not a lot of great stuff to talk about. And I know a lot of people like stats and numbers, so let's get started with some stats and numbers today. Let me pull up my first graphic here for you guys. There it is right there. You can see it. This is a graphic comparing the Cowboys rookie second-round edge, Donovan Ezeraku out of Boston College, who is, by all reports, lining up training camp, to New York Giants first-round edge, Abdul Carter. Carter was considered by many to be one of, if not the best football player in the 2025 draft. Not edge defender, but football player overall. A phenomenal prospect. I'm a big fan of his. He's doing some good things as well. But it's like these times when we get these hype trains, when we get into training camp and all this kind of stuff, I know there's a lot of media blitzes talking about what players are good, what players are not. I always like to take a step back and maybe look at some numbers to see, okay, this is a data back up what we're seeing here, especially with Ezeraku, and it's very interesting. So we've got our 2024 numbers for both Carter and Ezeraku on the screen here. In blue, we've got their sacks in 2024. In red, we've got their tackles for loss. So remember, Abdul Carter out of Penn State, one of, if not the best football player in the country, the universally best edge. Ezeraku was a steal for Dallas in the second round, a high-quality football player, but still, there was, by all reports, a big gap in terms of the quality of player, Carter versus Ezeraku. But you can see on the screen in front of you there, it's kind of interesting here. Ezeraku in 2024 had significantly more sacks than Abdul Carter. You can see again sacks in blue, Ezeraku on the right, Carter on the left there. Significantly more sacks for the Cowboys draft pick. A little bit more tackles for loss for Abdul Carter, the Giants selection. But you can see it's not like Ezeraku, based on 2024 numbers, is totally outclassed. In terms of sacks, he's better. Tackles for loss, only a little bit worse. In fact, I would argue, and the data supports this, the spread between the sacks between Carter and Ezeraku is greater than the spread between the tackles for loss. So we're talking about, at the very least, if you want to make this argument, from a production perspective, very similar players. But this is just 2024 numbers. Let's look at the last 3 years, right? Carter had 3 years in college. Let's look at Ezeraku's last 3 years just to compare apples to apples. Here's where it gets very interesting is, again, you can see Carter's on the left, Ezeraku's on the right. Sacks are in blue, tackles for loss are in red. And you can see last 3 seasons, their aggregate careers here, Ezeraku, more sacks, more tackles for loss, right? You can see actually that Ezeraku's performance in the TFL department significantly was better than it was in 2024 compared to better 2022 and 2023 than it was from in 2024 compared to the same years for Abdul Carter. So he actually leaped ahead of Carter in that department. That's very interesting there. But across the board, tackles for loss and sacks, Ezeraku was better than Abdul Carter. Now, I'm not saying Ezeraku will be better than Carter as a player. I'm not saying he was a better prospect, right? I think Ezeraku is going to be a really good player. I still think Abdul Carter has higher upside. But when we see these media reports and we see fans and social media accounts and even players and coaches talking about Ezeraku, we've covered him, what he's done through camp so far. It's been absolutely outstanding. And we get all this hype and buzz. I always like to take a step back and say, okay, are we seeing just a small sample size? Are we seeing just a practice run of this guy's life? And this is just far better football than he's ever played. Is he going to come back down to earth? I don't really think so, guys. When you look at the numbers, what Ezeraku did in college, he was better than Abdul Carter production-wise over the final 3 years of their careers from an aggregate perspective. And in 2024, basically more sacks, a little bit less tackles for loss. We'll just call them equivalent, just for argument's sake. So what we're seeing during training camp isn't the aberration. I would argue it's the norm if you consider, as pretty much everyone does, Abdul Carter to be an elite prospect. This is the most important piece of information when it comes to this young Cowboys second-round selection. I think to remember, and probably you'll hear all day, is as good as he is during training camp, this is not an anomaly. This isn't the run of his life. Based on what he did in college, this is par for the course. This is what he does. This is who he is. And that's obviously a great sign because that means he should be able to carry this into the preseason and, more importantly, into the regular season when the games actually go live and things actually matter. So data here, very interesting to get us going. Great sign for the young Cowboys second-round selection. All right, let's get into the stories here. Talking about injury concerns. This is according to Jen Slater, good reporter there. She said, sources tell me it's a high ankle sprain for Cowboys tackle Terence Steele. I'm told it is not considered a major injury and will only have them sitting out a few days. Good news for the lineman. Yeah, when I first heard, that Terence Steele had a high ankle sprain, I'm like, is he even going to be ready for the start of the regular season? Like, high ankle sprains are notoriously tough injuries, really bad ones. There are numerous reports where people, have a high ankle sprain, and oftentimes it's better to break your ankle. The recovery time, depending on the severity of the break, of course, could actually be significantly less for a broken ankle than it is for a high ankle sprain. It can be a nagging injury, a lagging injury that goes on for a while. Now, I will say this. Normally that happens with running backs, receivers, right, where a sprained ankle can last that long and have that kind of effect. The fact that it's an offensive tackle and Terence Steele, a little bit different dynamic. But the fact that he's day-to-day, that's a really good sign. I think one of the things that can happen when you're a Cowboys team with this kind of momentum and juice, and it's this way with any NFL team, of course, is when injuries start occurring and you get all this negative momentum in terms of, hey, we got a great roster, we're down a starter, now we've got to throw an unprepared guy in, and we have to change our practice plan and all this. And you kind of just lose the momentum you're building up, and you have to kind of reset. Injuries can hurt that during training camp, and of course during the regular season it can cost you games. Staying healthy or minimizing injuries is critically important. I think the fact that Terence Steele, minor injury here, a few days, let's take it easy. Let's not rush him back. Hey, listen, we talked about young offensive tackle Nathan Thomas. Let's get him some reps at right tackle here. Let's take advantage of this opportunity. Let him get some more opportunities to shine, develop, grow as a player as he tries to grow into a swing tackle. Really good player. Coach Schottenheimer was very high on him. We've covered Nathan Thomas a lot over the past couple of days. Really good potential coming out of college. He was better than a lot of draft picks that were selected much higher him last year. I think it's a good opportunity to let a younger guy like Thomas get a lot of reps. Don't rush Steele back. I don't think they will. I think they'll play it safe. But overall, really good news that the Cowboys starting right tackle doesn't have a severe injury here. Because at first glance, high ankle sprain, yikes. That's not a good one. All right, so DallasCowboys.com for Marcus Yamans, he had a list, and he went through and aggregated a couple of the guys that were, shiners the first few days of training camp, guys that really stood out. And I highlighted a few of them here because I think it's really important because it matches what I've seen in the research I've done. So Tyler Guyton is one of the guys he brought up, and I'll read the report in just a second. But I was breaking down film of Tyler Guyton, and I was, doing some film reviews, and you can see him on our channel if you want to scroll through and take the time to do that. And one of the things that's interesting with Guyton, based on his rookie year, is the consistency problems were true in there, and the penalties were true in there. But man, there were flashes where he was an elite left tackle, right? He would have two really great pass blocking plays in a row, and it just against good players, and just lock it down, dominate. You're like, this guy's a stud. And then he'd totally whiff, give up a sack, fumble, and you'd be like, man, this is just tough. Or he'd have a couple good plays in the running game, and then he'd have a terrible holding call that would just destroy a drive. And you're just like, man, how does this happen? Like, consistency is an issue, experience is an issue. He was a developmental prospect coming out of college. People forget that, right? You go back to every scouting profile of Guyton, everyone was like, listen, a lot of great physical tools, high upside. It's going to take time, and it looks like it may be starting to pay off. Let's read this report here to highlight just some boots on the ground reporting here. It's a big year for the former first-round pick. There's an expectation now from fans around the NFL to see a significant jump in production from year 1 to year 2 in the league. And so far, Guyton has checked all the boxes. Has it been a perfect week of practice? Nope. But he's shown an ability to pick up pass rushers by standing strong in his sets and footwork. Multiple times already, he's shown growth in his ability to reset his hands and regain leverage against some of the speed rushers that Dallas employs. Each proving that progress has been made in the offseason, and teaching is paying off. Yeah, so Guyton spent a lot of work this offseason with Duke Mayweather, the famed offensive line coach. He spent time with Tyron Smith as well. So he's been putting in the work, got a lot of praise for the coaching staff for the effort he's put in. I always like to hear these reports about guys putting in the time. I want to see the results pay off. Obviously, I'm biased because I want to see these players get better and the Cowboys to play better and to win. But I also want to see, just from I'll say it from a cultural perspective, if that makes sense, I want to see hard work result in success. I feel like that's one of the great things about football and really just about life in general. If you put in the time and put in the work and put in the effort, and you actually are dedicated and are willing to humble yourself to surround yourself with smarter, talented, better people than you are, like, for example, Guyton with Smith, Guyton with Mayweather, and put in the time to get better, I want to see you get better. I think that's the kind of society, culture I like to see. Certainly want to see it in National Football League, and usually that is the case. Not always the case, but most of the time it is, and it's great to see that with Guyton. I think that's a really great sign for him, again, seeing results after putting in the effort. I think one of the commentary there that really stuck out to me is the resetting of hands, right, when it comes to some of these speed rushers. So what he's talking about here is that a lot of times in these speed rushers, what will happen, and I've got a small screen here. Here, let me go back to the wide shot so you guys can kind of see a little bit more what I'm talking about. Right, so if you're pass setting, right, you see, I'll try and do this as best I can. If you're pass protecting, right, a defensive lineman, edge rusher will try and knock down your hands, right? They're trying to knock your hands down and like rip by you, right? So if I'm pass protecting and edge rusher's coming this way, I'm trying to pass set and check in with my hands and get on him. He's going to try and knock down my hands and then rip or swim over the top or something like that. So when that happens, I try and set and knock down the hands. You've got to immediately reset. Right, you can't just sit there and then grab. You can't just try and hug. It's hard because you're moving your feet, you're moving your hips, you're moving your body, and this is going 100 miles an hour. Right, these are really fast stuff. So when someone is coming at you and they knock down your hands, resetting quickly and on target. Right, you want to hit them in the breastplate. You want to reset, punch. Right, you don't want to reset and then you grab, or reset and you miss high. Right, one of the things you see a lot of times if you watch broadcast footage, guys will get their hands knocked down and defenders will dip. And so when they try and reset, they go high and they miss because they go over the shoulders. And that's how you've got these defensive ends that are able to go underneath and kind of go low and then sack the quarterback. So in this situation where you're trying to reset when he knocks your hands down, you're able to reset, get on the breastplate. That's when you can use your size and strength. And as a tackle, like Guyton is, because he's bigger and stronger, if the guy knocks his hands down and you reset and get your grip inside, like Tyron Smith did famously, it's over. You win. And we're starting to see, based on this reporting, more of that from Guyton, which is obviously a really great sign for this young offensive lineman. So really good to see that. Really good reporting there as well. All right, next guy on the list that was highlighted in the same report, Kaiir Elam, another guy we've covered a lot this offseason. From the report, following a stellar offseason and initial impression in Dallas, Elam has continued his momentum in Oxnard. He kicked off training camp with the interception of Dak Prescott during Wednesday practice, even earning high praise from Brian Schottenheimer. He plays the game the right way. Schottenheimer said he studies, he's on top of splits, awareness, and relating to receivers based on their splits. So you're noticing a theme here, right? Guys playing the right way. You got Guyton putting in the time, humbling himself, working with smarter people, veteran people to get better, honing his craft. Kaiir Elam seems to be a thinking man's corner, at least at this point, based on the reporting and based on the results. Love to see that. Again, from my perspective, when I played at the collegiate level, small-time football, I wasn't very good, didn't have any sort of impressive stats. So if you Google me, there's not going to be anything there. But if you look at what I think as a player, what I like to see in players and the way I played, I always like to think of it as a thinking approach, right? Be strategic, be tactical about it. Know what the opposition is trying to do to you, know what their strategy is, know what the individual is trying to do to you, and factor that into what your strategy is on offense or defense, what your play call is, and then adjust your technique and your playing style accordingly over the course of a snap. And it sounds simple in a lot of ways, but it's really hard because it's happening so fast. There's a lot of things going on to be able to look at the situation and say, oh, if I'm a corner and the receiver splits changes a little bit, okay, he's normally lined up, let's say, right on the hash. Now he's or right on the numbers, right in the middle of the numbers. Let's say, oh, now he's lined up just a little bit inside the numbers. What's he doing? He's trying to create space for an out route. Okay, I know an out route's coming. Now I can defend it better. Vice versa, right? If he now shifts a little bit outside the numbers his next split, okay, he's trying to create space maybe for an inside route. All right, I need to prepare for that, right? So again, that's all part of the game. It is a very hard thing to do because you're going 100 miles an hour, right? It's not like you can get out there in your stance if you're a corner, wide receiver comes up on you and you're like, okay, let me take a step back and think about this. All right, I'm man on man on this guy. We're not blitzing, so I know the quarterback's not going to get rid of the ball immediately. I got some safety help. Okay, that's good. Let me make sure I remember that. This receiver, what's he do? Oh, that's CeeDee Lamb. Okay, he's pretty good, I think. Yeah, he's pretty good. All right, so he's good receiver. Where is he lined up? No, you don't have that much time. It's you get to your spot, you get set, and it's go. Right? You have to be able to process all this information quickly. You have to be able to think and process upstairs very, very quickly. It is hard to do. One of the things I love for any position is to have people that can process quickly and understand the game at a very base level. That's why really experienced veteran quarterbacks like the Bradys, the Breezes, the Rodgers of the world, and Peyton Manning were so good for so long because even as their physical skills waned, their understanding and their processing only improved. It allowed them to be successful at a very high level. That's an underrated aspect of Prescott's game as well. But again, Elam, the thinking man's corner, emerging as a key part of the Cowboys defense here. Love to see that. All right, next guy on the list, and here we go. MVP of the camp for 3 days of practices anyway, according to Yeomans, is George Pickens. All had been on Pickens since the moment he arrived in Dallas. How would he fit in? How will he mesh with the offense? How will he contribute? So far, all these questions have been answered by Pickens, who has turned in 3 impressive practices so far. Whether it's his knowledge of the offense, again, thinking, love to see that, guys. His ability to block in the run game or his incredible hands and athleticism in the passing game, Pickens has been the star of the camp so far. Yeah, I think this is one of those classic examples of when you have perfect interest alignment, right? Pickens is obviously playing for his future in the NFL. He's got a new environment. He's in an offense that he reportedly likes to play. His play calls better. He's got more stability at the quarterback position. Has a true running mate at wide receiver in CeeDee Lamb, much better than he ever had at Pittsburgh by far. I think this is a perfect situation for Pickens. He's incentivized. Obviously, he's got a lot of contract opportunities right around the corner to do extremely well, to maybe head into a big payday, whether with Dallas or somebody else in the future. So he's perfectly aligned to go out and bust his butt and do well. And let's give credit where credit is due to the Cowboys for making this deal way back when, because all of this goes into the decision-making process. When you're acquiring a player, you have to look at, okay, is he going to come in and is he going to be incentivized to do extremely well for us right out the bat? And this is always the risk of signing big-name players in free agency to monster deals. Cowboys fans, you'll remember cornerback Brandon Carr got a big deal with Dallas, formerly the Kansas City Chiefs. He came to Dallas and he never lived up to the dollars, right? The Cowboys basically said, you're a good corner. We're going to pay you great corner money, and we want you to take on that mantle and be a great number one corner for us. Carr never did, right? And I don't want to pick on Brandon Carr too much. That's just the reality. And I'm not saying he didn't work hard or didn't care. He just never could live up to that. And when that happens, when you make those kind of deals, you're betting on as a team, and I think it's usually a dumb bet. Okay, a player's here. We're going to pay him here and hope he rises to that occasion, right? I don't think that really works, right? We see that sometimes in corporate America where it's like, hey, we're going to bring in a smart engineer or a smart executive or whatever because he's really smart here. We think under our staff he can provide this amount of value. And that can work in corporate America, but where it doesn't work in the NFL is because there's a salary cap, right? It's a zero-sum business, right? You can't borrow. If you're the Cowboys, you can't say, well, we'll pay more money or we'll raise more money to buy more players, right? It doesn't work that way. If you give somebody $1 million on your roster, that's $1 million you can't spend on somebody else. So you have to get a player and spend what they are worth today or less, preferably. That's just how it works. That's why the Micah Parsons negotiations are so ongoing and so long, because if you overpay by too much and provide too much dollars versus the value, you run into problems. That's a big question mark and concern with Prescott's contract, even though we can all agree he's a really good quarterback. Really, really big problem with how that's set up. So again, you have to be mindful of that. And because of the Cowboys acquiring Pickens at this point in his contract for what they did, Pickens right now is providing so much value versus that cost. It's one of the steals of the offseason. I'm going to keep going back to it. I think the Cowboys did pull off the steal of the offseason. Again, the way it's going so far, Pickens having a great camp, what they gave up and what he's costing them. We talked about the Philadelphia Eagles last year. Their linebacker, Zach Baum, right? They got him for a song. Saquon Barkley, relatively cheap, all things considering. Both those guys had incredible seasons. Pickens so far, following that same track. Definitely something to keep an eye on and a big reason for optimism in Dallas. All right, let's go on to this next report here. Talking about a breakout guy. This may be a little hard to read, so I'll try and read it for you guys here. I pulled this off DallasCowboys.com, the website. It's just the text. It's a little unfortunate, but this is according to Patrick Walker at Voice of the Star, if you want to follow him on X. He posted or wrote, according to this article, there's a lot of rightful talk about the challenge to solve the equation at linebacker with the prolonged absence of DeMarvion Overshown due to his recovery from a torn ACL suffered last season. But what's often overlooked is other young promising talent in the room, namely Marist Liufau. Having gone from being a rookie third-round pick out of Notre Dame to the green dot, that means the play caller, Mike Zimmer's defense when Eric Kendricks battled injury is nothing to shake a stick at, considering the level of learning and acumen required to pull it off, and the fact that Zimmer isn't exactly known as a forgiving coach. 1 year later, Liufau was dissecting plays in training camp with a precision usually reserved for cardiovascular surgeons, combining his speed, quickness, and physicality with a rapidly growing veteran-level confidence. All right, so I don't know anything about cardiovascular surgeons compared to diagnosing offenses and making plays, but I'll take Walker's word for it here. And this is just a recurring theme what you've seen on this episode so far, right? Smart, thinking players, right? The thinking man's corner, Kaiir Elam, Guyton putting in the time, Pickens understanding the offense. Now Liufau, right? Doing a great job, smart linebacker. We're talking about a Dallas Cowboys team that is not just going to be more physical, and this is sort of this weird paradox that happens in the NFL. The Cowboys are going to be more physical, and they're going to be more intelligent, and it's usually how it works. You look at the New England Patriots, Bill Belichick dynasty. Look at Bill Parcells' teams, great example as well. Very, very physical teams. They're also very smart, right? if you have that sort of weird combination where you focus on being physical, you also generally combine intelligence with it. And I know it sounds a little bizarre, but I think it actually makes sense from a perspective. If you think about it, like if you're going to be a multimillionaire or if you get paid a lot of money and you're going to throw your helmet into the ring, you're going to throw your body up against the wall repeatedly, you have to have something in your head to be like, hey, this doesn't make logical sense, because if I'm really physical and I'm going to hurt my body, that's millions of dollars. Why would I do that? You would only be willing to do that if you're able to think beyond the superficial layer and go, okay, but this is for the good of the team and for winning and long-term success, right? It's that next level thinking, next level processing that allows teams to be more physical, right? It's a great example. You look at guys like Michael Jordan in the NBA, Kobe Bryant was very similar, right? In terms of, I don't want to say physical because it's basketball, but they had a very cerebral approach despite being so skilled, so talented, so aggressive. It really just shone when they played the game. Again, having that ability to think beyond the superficial level, to focus on certain aspects of the game. We see this in a lot of players, right? Often the toughest, meanest guys, the guys who are hyper aggressive, are very cerebral, very intelligent, think of the game at a very, very high level. We've seen this a lot of times in Dallas Cowboys history. You go back to the Landry era. They were full of those kind of players. The Cowboys right now are a great combination of physical and smart. I love that in a team. I love that in players. Liufau emerging. And we did a film review on him. If you really want to go break down some film, we got a lot on this channel. Make sure you go check it out in our library. He's got a bright future in front of him as well. I think he's an underrated piece of the Dallas Cowboys defense, and I'm really excited to see him do well. All right, that's enough of the prepared remarks I have today. I got a few of the things I want to touch on real quick before we shift over to comments and answering questions. There's a thing going around right now, and on social media and on YouTube and all that kind of stuff. You get in the media as well, the regular media like Fox Sports, ESPN, stuff like that, where the best way to get views and clicks is just to be critical of the Cowboys and Jerry Jones. It's just true. It's just the reality. And one of the things that's frustrating me is I think we see a lot, certainly of Cowboys fandom that is frustrated with Jones and frustrated with the Cowboys for lack of postseason success, and rightly so. All that is very valid. But I think we're seeing a lot of people play up that. We're trying to get more engagement and get their brand built up, to do it for more dollars. So basically monetizing people's frustration with the Cowboys leadership and the lack of postseason wins, right? And I understand from their perspective, hey, it's just a business, but it is frustrating when I see people on the internet, when I see people on the media are just hyper negative all the time about Dallas, about Jerry Jones, about the leadership, about the entire team. And one of the things I really try and focus on this channel, whether it's with our daily show or other content we do, again, we do some deep dives, we do film reviews, obviously you guys can see all that kind of stuff, where we want to be positive. We want to focus on being positive. We want to look on the good things. It's not always going to be good. There's a lot of bad, and we'll cover that when it comes to it. But let's not just be obsessively negative just to drive engagement, just to bait people to respond, just so I make more money. That's not how I do things here on this network. That's not how I do things with our brand. That's not how I do things on this channel. So I just want to get out there and let's just remind everyone to try and stay positive. This is a game. This is a beautiful, wonderful, amazing game, and it's great to watch and be a part of. Let's not let it just be a negative force in our lives. There's enough of that in the world to tear us down. Let's try and enjoy this for what it is, an awesome game that we all know and love and appreciate. All right, with that, let's jump into some comments questions we got yesterday. So this is from Monte Murdoch 5032. He asked, is there a certain standard amount of time that if a pass thrown by at the professional level that's standard operating procedure, like the ball has to be thrown in 4 seconds or the QB is considered sacked, especially for up-tempo, no-huddle plays? Yeah, really good question. So I think it depends on the play call, right? I mean, there's sort of a standard of like 2.5 to 3 seconds, depending on who you talk to. But it really depends on the structure of the play and the concept, right? So, for example, there's a situation that happens all the time. It's 3rd and 3, 3rd and 4. You're just trying to get the first down. Let's say you're trying to run a quick out to CeeDee Lamb in man coverage, right? And so if you're trying to catch this, if you're Prescott in the shotgun, you catch a snap, you throw it quickly, right? You're not holding the ball on very long. If you're an offensive lineman, your responsibility there is to get the defender's hands down, because it's a quick throw. They could jump up and bat it at the line of scrimmage. So your job is to fire out at them to get their hands down, right? Now, if you fire at them and pass protection, they're going to run around you eventually. So you may get beat in a second and a half, and they may get to the quarterback if the quarterback holds onto the ball too long, but that's not your responsibility, right? So it kind of depends on the play. General rule of thumb is 2.5, 3 seconds. Play action, bootlegs, things like that are a completely different animal. But I think the more important thing to consider is making sure you give the quarterback the right throwing lanes and right pocket in the context of the play, and make sure you give your quarterback an out, right? And now you obviously ideally don't want to ever give up any pressure, but from an offensive lineman's perspective, if you do get beat or give up pressure, if you stay on the guy or keep driving him inside or keep washing him, like let's say he beats you inside, but you stay on him and keep driving him and keep past, at least the quarterback can flush and escape or something like that, right? So there's a lot of different angles to approach this question. I think 2.5, 3 seconds is considered standard. Now we talk about up tempo plays, no huddle. Usually that's a little quicker. The quarterback will get rid of the ball because when it comes to those situations, let's take a standard thing, 2 wide receivers on each side and shotgun with the running back right next to the quarterback. They've got some predefined route combinations, right? Let's say one side will be smash and the quarterback will signal smash and the other side will be, I don't know what it'll be. Let's say it's smash 2. I'll do 2 smashes, whatever, right? And so that's a predefined concept. Everyone knows what route they're running. Quarterback looks up. It's no huddle. It's up tempo. Defense is kind of in whatever coverage they want to be in, so the quarterback can see it quickly. He's going to get rid of the ball fast. Now, offensive line wise, you don't know that. You get the protection call that whatever it may be. It's it's a 306. Let's say you have series of protection. So let's say the quarterback will say 385. That'll be 300 series protection, which will be a standard pass protection. A lot of people using that jargon. And 5 means the running back's going to the left or whatever the calls are, right? So that's just the structure in terms of what the offensive line is hearing, and they're blocking to that. So while the play matters, it's not the play combination that you may see or hear on broadcast of what the quarterback's doing. It's what the quarterback tells the offensive line. So that's why sometimes we'll get some situations where the quarterback will get sacked, and it's not the offensive line's fault because the quarterback called a protection that really was supposed to be a quick throw or whatever, and the quarterback didn't get rid of it on time. So it's sort of a long-winded answer to your question. Generally, 2.5, 3 seconds is considered standard, but a lot of it hinges on what the quarterback tells the offensive line, the play call to them, so that way they know what to execute because it does depend on what's flowed down to them. All right, we got a comment I just wanted to talk to here. This is from Steven Vanover, posted. I made a comment about practicing about, want to dial it back a little bit to avoid injuries. He posted, if I may, Jimmy Johnson would disagree with your take on physical practices. A coach wants to know who will let off the gas when they are dog tired. A coach needs to know who can still be effective when they're gassed and it's 90 degrees in the shade. Some can still bring the cheese. Most cannot if it's good enough for JJ. Yeah, that's a good point. I don't disagree with that in theory. I just think at a certain point in the NFL, right, we're talking about guys who have obviously high school, college at the highest level. They've got a certain level of talent and a certain level of physicality to them at this point where I hope you're able to bring the cheese, so to speak. But I do understand wanting to push people. I do think if you look at the Jimmy Johnson era, and there is one little distinction, is that it wasn't until really the past 2 decades, the 21st century, that we started to see super hyper serious, dedicated year-round training, lifting, diet for all of these guys. Now, everyone's got their own personal trainer, right? I mean, there were the old stories of the 80s and 90s where these guys would, Jerry Rice of the world, Emmitt Smith, Walter Payton, they do like hill sprints, right? They'd find a hill where they were staying in the offseason and do hill sprints, right? Nothing wrong with that. That was basically a big part of their conditioning. Or they go to a gym and lift weights. Now it's very regimented, very structured. Everyone's got their own strength and conditioning staff. The strength and conditioning teams on the teams like the Cowboys can communicate directly with the players via social media, cell phones, all that stuff. So the era comparison isn't quite apples to apples. Now your point is still valid, right? And so I do think you want to see that over the course of practice, but I think you want it to be very structured. So I'll give you an example. Maybe you run you throw like a surprise situation at the players. So let's say the players know going into a period, or they're told, hey, we're going to run 5 goal line plays, and then we're going to go on to do something else. We're going to do 5 goal line plays, and we're going to go to 2-minute drill after that. So you do your 5 goal line plays, and then you stop and say, no, actually switching up. We're doing now 5 more goal line plays. Get on the line of scrimmage now. And it just to kind of just shock the system and let them respond to that. And I think that's a way you can evaluate and tell. I think you want to avoid making practices too unbearable, especially because, again, players are trained so heavily these days. We're seeing in the NBA, for example, a massive growth in Achilles injuries and similar kind of severe injuries. I'm personally concerned about that and how it could affect the National Football League. But you do make a valid point. I just think maybe there's a different way to approach it, maybe changing up with some wrenches you throw at the players as time goes on over the course of practices. That may be a good middle ground to kind of evaluate players. All right, well, that's all I've got for you guys today. We'll be back tomorrow with our daily show. Again, we've got some great film reviews we're planning once the preseason starts with all the Cowboys rookies, so make sure you stay prepared for that. Give us your comments. If you have any comments, leave a question again below. Like you probably just saw, we'll answer and address the comments and questions on future shows. But until next time, I'm Nick, and this has been Saturday Morning Inspection.